So when you first set up your shop, you don't have the money, you don't have the time to get everything, to make everything, and you're often working with what you have on hand. I set up this current workspace just about 5 years ago. I think there was 2 incandescent light bulbs here and nothing else. The only thing I brought with me from my old workspace was this nasty little table. And it's not as bad as it looks. It's actually quite stout. It was originally built for refinishing concrete countertops, and it lived its life outside. But it was about all I could salvage. And I built a lot of furniture on this table. I built the bench I have on it. I built a couple of beds, nightstands, built a really nice dresser, one of my better pieces, on just a flat piece of wood. But as time goes by, you fill in the gaps. You make yourself a router table, you make a nice miter table, you make a good workbench. And now it's time for this sort of big work surface assembly table to be transformed into something a little more useful. You can't really tell with the camera, I'm just abnormally tall, so this is really a high piece. You can see it's a good 4 inches above table saw height. But what I'm going to do is take some pieces off of this and remake it into a smaller assembly table that I can also use as an outfeed table, and I'll take you along so you can watch. So if you watched the router table video, you saw that I came across a bunch of 4x4-ish really old maple posts from a barn, and this is about the best of what's left. And they're going to be the legs for this revised assembly and outfeed table. So let's mill these up. So while I frantically take the old table apart, I will clarify that I've never really needed a cut table, as I don't really work with plywood that frequently, but I've got a kitchen project coming up, and I thought this was a perfect time to make an outfeed table that would also help me with plywood disassembly. Because I want the table to be right at the same height as the table saw, I've got to be pretty accurate with how I cut the legs. So now that I know how tall the wheel is, I can make the legs their final length. I did take the time to clean up some of the old lumber that came off the older table so I could reuse it. I was real careful to remove all of the nails and screws. All right, we've got legs, long rails, short rails, and top supports. All of this is good milled lumber. This is reclaimed stuff that was simply milled to be the same height to support the top. And it's kind of janky, but it's free wood and it will serve its purpose quite well. I won't bore you with endless Panta-Router footage, but when you've got to make a really strong joint, there's little better than a mortise and tenon joint, and when you've got to make a bunch of them, there's nothing faster than the Panta-Router.
going to make a 1/2 inch deep channel for the top support stretchers to rest in. The easiest way to make it is with a router, and then just clean it up after with a chisel.
Angle.
I've used this wheel on some other mobile carts. It's pretty inexpensive, it's pretty stout, and it has a great locking mechanism. Previously, I've just put a threaded nutsert into a leg. But in this case, I don't think this thing's going to be out rolling down the road, so I'm just going to make 2 holes to allow the shaft and the nut to go in. And then from there, I'll just epoxy the whole thing together. I'm reusing the old top, but it's a bit long for the new table, so I'm going to get my foot out of the way and then shorten it. Put a dowel in each corner just to keep the top from lifting or moving sideways while using it. It's not glued because I think down the road I'll have to replace this top, so it's just a placeholder. I do like things to look nice, so I am putting some yellow pine edge banding that was left over from making the rails. The bottom will have a really simple shelf, and I'm just going to put in a ledge that I can run tongue and groove on top of. Putting a heavy coat of wipe-on poly on. It's homemade with half mineral spirits and half polyurethane, and the fiberboard or MDF will really soak it in. After that, I put 2 coats of regular polyurethane on, sanding in between. I figure the bottom will be a great place to store really big and bulky things like miter sleds and other table saw attachments. Because I'm also going to use this as a cutting table for plywood, I'm going to go ahead and install the Parf dog system. Here I am using the layout tool. This video is not a how-to with this. There's a couple of really good ones out there that I can link to. I'll put in the description. But basically, you use the Pythagorean theorem to lay out perfectly square hole arrangements. And here I am counting up 10 holes and centering the two together so that the vertical 3mm holes will all be exactly 90 degrees to the original holes. And I will add that I went ahead and drilled the full field of 3mm holes throughout the entire table. And a lot of the information I found suggests you do that even if you're not going to drill the 20mm holes, which I'm starting here. The reason for that is if you decide you need a hole later, you've already got your grid of 3mm holes. So if you can see in this screenshot here or this video, I've got the 3mm holes throughout the entire worktop at this point, though I'm not going to drill them all. With the Parf jig, you really just get into a rhythm of aligning the drill jig with the two 3mm pins. Drill your hole, move it, rinse and repeat. You can get pretty good with it. It comes with a vacuum hose attachment, but my use of that I found that it just cumbersome and it really slowed you down. I have no problem just sweeping it down to the floor. I'm going to have to vacuum it all up afterwards. But you can really move along pretty quick, and there's no need to switch to the other position until you back yourself into a corner. But if you think about it ahead of time, you can generally get most of your holes done with the 3mm pins. And they're, in my opinion, more accurate because it's one hole, not two holes. You'll see what I mean. At the very last hole, you're invariably sort of backed into a corner, and you have to use the Parf dogs to position it using the holes that you've already enlarged. So this final hole in the top, I can't get to it with any of the 3mm holes. I have already drilled them, so I've got to switch the drill bit to the other position and go ahead and use the Parf dogs to line up with this last little hole. And for those that are curious, I did a grid array of 4 holes at each corner, and then a row at the bottom, and a row as near as I could to the center for clamping purposes.
Are you getting covered? Are you covered in sawdust?
So here it is all finished. It's ready to be an assembly table, an outfeed table, and a cut table. It was a fun project, and it certainly has made it more convenient to work into the shop. And I also like that I can store crosscut sleds and miter bars and other large bulky things under the table.